And I'm Kat, and welcome to the Crime Chat. I am your forensic femme fatale. Natalie is your true crime-addict connoisseur.
We're just two normal girls obsessed with dark crimes, evil minds, and occasionally the unknown.
And here is your disclaimer, chatters. The following Crime Chat does contain adult content and violent scenarios. It's a doozy today, so your listener discretion is advised.
You have been warned. But before we get into today's Crime Chat, Kat, what have you done?
Have you heard of the series called Silo?
No. No, I've never heard of that.
So
Where is it?
I think it's on Apple TV. I think it's on Apple Plus.
Okay.
We watched it a little bit ago, and then the second season came out, and basically it's like an apocalyptic, like, survival disaster, but basically the world was coming to an end, and they built these silos, and there's different communities that live underground, so it's all fend for yourself, but there's a system in place, there's like a democracy in place, and then of course you have the power, you run everything, the people are always seeking the power or a position to make decisions,
Right.
And if they do something that breaks the law, in the silo law, inside the silo, they get told to go clean. And what that means is they get kicked out of the silo, and they have to, like, clean the windows on the outside of the silo, but it's, like, all...
Okay, I've seen it.
Oh, have you?
Now that you said that one, I didn't remember the name, but I've seen it, yes.
Yeah. So second season came out, so we've been kind of catching up with that. It's super interesting, kind of has a unique twist on surviving life and not normal. And then as I was watching it, there was a guy who was playing like one of the main characters. I didn't recognize him in the first season. I don't think he was in the first season, but I'm looking at it and I'm going, is that Tim Robbins? You remember Tim Robbins?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going,
Is Tim Robbins in that? I don't
yes. He's in
started a long time
He's
ago.
in the second season. It's Tim Robbins. Like, and then the rapper Common is in it too. He plays a great character. It's really interesting, kind of catching up with that. And then another season of Outlander came on, and it's okay. Like, it's more of it's too romantic-y for me.
Yeah, it's soft porn.
A lot of it is, yeah. It's not even like Game of Thrones soft porn where there's at least dragons.
No.
But Chris really, really, really likes it, so I watch it-ish when it comes on. But it's a very interesting concept, I think, in that storyline, too, where at the Stones, it goes into a different time frame and kind of sci-fi, so I do like that aspect of it.
That's when I started to watch it, when it was a new idea of, like, the whole Celtic thing, and
right,
I was like, ooh, what is this? And it was really cool with the time travel. But then by season 3, I'm like, all right, now they're just beating a dead horse. Like, oh, we get it. You time travel, we get it. You like sex, we get it. So it really didn't introduce anything else but that. So I stopped watching it. But I love the actress and the actor.
Oh, yeah. And I do like the historical aspect of it because she obviously went through the history of the American Revolution and all these different wars and battles and how it plays into, she can't really go around and going, the United States gets their freedom. Like, they think that she's some kind of witch. They've called her a witch several times on there. So I do like the historical aspect of it where they put character faces to these historical figures. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that storyline. The best stories are based on true stories. So.
True.
And then there was one other thing that I saw, and I don't know if you saw this. Obviously, we don't really talk politics or anything like that, but we are getting ready to turn over for a new presidency.
Inauguration.
Yes. And as with most presidents, when they are leaving the office, they do pardons. And I saw one. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. And it's not necessarily a pardon, but what he's doing is he's commuting their sentences to life in prison.
Yes.
And that includes the marathon bomber, the Dokar Sarsanoff, mass shooters Robert Bowers, who killed 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, and then fucking Dylan Roof, the one who killed 9 people at the Emmanuel Church just down the road. He's literally from 20 minutes from where I live. That's not where he did the shooting. He did it in Charleston, but he lived like 20 minutes away.
Yeah, and that's just a few you mentioned. You didn't mention
That's just a few.
Kids for Cash.
No.
It's almost like he's releasing the devils.
Yeah, he was saying that he's not condoning their crimes, but the crimes that they've committed are heinous. But why commute them?
No.
Why commute them to life in prison versus keeping them on death row? Like,
we're just...
How do the victims' families feel about that?
Thank you. That's exactly what my next statement was. We're forgetting that there are families and victims tied to all of these people
yes.
that feel safer in the community that they're away. And these people are not normal criminals. These are the worst of the worst, and they are getting
hate-driven,
horrible.
Yeah, mass murderers.
They should never. These people are not to me, the people that you commute. Like there are other people that are sitting in jail. Like people that didn't commit murder that are sitting in jail that he can commute.
Yeah.
You know, maybe people that shouldn't be there or people that were subjected to like more race-fueled being, you know, as far as that's concerned, like focus on that. Like this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, murders? Really? Murders?
Well, I mean, you kind of, like I said, you kind of know what's coming towards the end of a presidency. They try to use their last little bit of power to do, quote unquote, do good before leaving, but I don't know what good this is going to do. And I just felt for the families. I thought it was ridiculous.
It's terrible. I felt for families too. I really, it was a gut punch when I heard a couple of these people.
Yep.
Gut punch.
Well, that's it. Trying to enjoy the new year. How about you?
Future crime chat. We'll focus on something like this for a future crime chat. Yeah. We have to. It's like in the news. We have to.
It's in the news. I wish we could say it was Nat's Nutty News, but it's just nutty.
It could be Nat's Nutty News. Okay, so I watched the movie Mermaids. I went the other route. I went wholesome.
Like the old?
Yeah, with Cher.
80? Yeah, like 80s?
Yeah, I forgot how good that movie was. I forgot. So first of all, Cher is just sexy, magnetic, amazing. It's so funny. It's like, okay, so I'm not saying that Winona Ryder is gorgeous. Love her. She got that doty little face. But when you stand her next to a goddess like Cher, it really is like you could see the different types of beauty that there are because like Cher, she's beautiful, but I would say that Winona Ryder is more of a natural beauty in a way.
Sure.
And like this comparison, you can actually, it's still happening today. Like the new version of Snow White is coming out. I don't know if you heard all the conspiracies going on. But one of my favorite actresses is playing the evil queen, and that's Gal Gadot. And to me, she is just like a goddess, Amazon woman of our time.
I didn't know she was playing the evil queen. I knew they were doing like a live version. Yeah. I didn't know it was Gal Gadot. Oh.
And again, the actress that's playing Snow White, she's adorable, she's really pretty, but she's no Gal Gadot. And
is she the fairest of them all?
Thank you. We have to believe that she's the fairest of them all when you're standing next to Gal Gadot. Like no one's Gal Gadot in all black, even sexier. Come on now.
I mean,
it doesn't make any sense. So I don't know.
So is that when you root for the evil queen?
Yes, I am. So yeah, that's what I did. And then I also started doing some research on my next case, which is going to be an unknown. Should be fun stuff.
Yay!
That's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it. And we just celebrated, literally, this is the first day of the new year.
We're recording on New Year's Day. What a way to celebrate. Everything's starting off great.
At least you went out. I was in bed by 8 o'clock. I mean, I woke up at 12:30. And I walked in, like, I was just walking around the house, and then I was just, like, went to wake my husband up to be like, you know, Happy New Year. And I'm like, no, I can't. No. I don't know.
Well, we went out for, like, a dinner and drink, and I was in bed by 9:30.
Were you?
We came back home. Yeah. Well, so I'm getting ready to start a new class in a few days, and I'm going to be out of pocket for a little bit, so I'm trying to read. It's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Very heavy reading in this class, so I'm trying to get ahead, and I was reading. Like, I went...
That's like your
to
porn.
bed and was reading. Oh my God, let me tell you. Okay, so I'm reading a book called Rabbit Run. It's part of the mandatory reading. There's that book, and there's another book called Housekeeping. The class that I'm doing is basically American literature and how it has changed throughout, like, events in the world, like how literature itself has adapted to universal changes, essentially. And I read quite a porn episode this morning.
Really?
I was like, that was descriptive. I was very surprised. I think it was written, I want to say it was written in the 50s or 60s, because it refers back to, like, the 30s being, like, not that long ago. So, yeah, I was like, well, that was surprising.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. We've got alcohol abuse, we've got drug use, we've got adultery, we've got sex, we've got old dirty men.
Oh, boy.
Like, I never would have thought, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, Kat, you asked me to do an intro on how serial killers get their nicknames.
Yeah. They're monikers.
Or how they're born.
Yeah.
So I did some research, and let's take a deep dive.
Yes.
The public's fascination with true crime often begins with the chilling and mysterious monikers given to serial killers. Mm-hmm. These nicknames can evoke terror, curiosity, and even a sense of dark intrigue, like a crime chatter. Mm-hmm. But how do these infamous names come to life? Serial killer nicknames serve as a shorthand to encapsulate the essence of killers' crimes, their methods, or the chilling psychology behind their actions. More than just catchy labels, they are crafted to grab headlines and to help the public identify the case when they're reading about it.
So when they know, like, whatever, the Night Stalker, you know essentially what it's about,
And ultimately to keep the narrative lasting longer than what's in there. Keep it a household thing, you know? However, seriously.
For us, okay, but, like, I'm thinking, like, Mary and Bob with their 2 children, Sarah and little Joey. You sit around the dinner table and start talking about, did you hear the latest on da-da-da-da-da? Yeah, I mean, for us, it's fine. But that's just hard to picture, like, in a normal house. We're normal, but, like...
We're normal. We are the new normal.
In the stereotypical household.
Yeah. Which are the ones that usually have the BTKs in them. So let's just say, you know what, sometimes it's okay to, like I said before, let a little of it out every day.
At a time, yes.
Okay.
Let the crazy out a little bit so it doesn't blow up.
Right. Now, with this said, this does raise ethical questions, the way they create these names. From media sensationalism to police-driven descriptors, the names given to these killers reflect a blend of creativity, fear, and cultural content.
Yep.
So nicknames for serial killers are not random. They are meticulously crafted by journalists, law enforcement, to communicate something essential about the killer and their crimes.
And sometimes they name themselves. Zodiac, BTK.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes I will hereby be known as.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, here are 7 key elements involved in the name creation of a killer. Number 1, location. Location-based nicknames roots the killer's actions in a specific community, emphasizing the local impact of the crimes. These names are often straightforward and immediately resonate with the local area. Here are 3. 1, the Boston Strangler.
Boston.
Yeah.
Boston.
Exactly, Boston. This is Albert DeSalvo. The name emphasizes the terror inflicted on Boston, Massachusetts by the murder of 13 women. The next one is the Long Island serial killer. This person is unidentified. Bodies were found along the Gilgo Beach area along Long Island, which earned this killer this name.
Sometimes they give them names if it's an unknown suspect too, right? Like they want to refer to it as something.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think the killer identity has anything to do with the catchy phrase or moniker that they come up with.
Yeah.
It really is about a focus on the crime, the location. Next one, the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. Sutcliffe's brutal murders in Yorkshire, England, involved the legacy of Jack the Ripper, connecting him to historical archetype of fear. All right, number 2, the method of killing. Names often highlight the killer's specific MO and create a connection to the crimes, emphasizing the horror and uniqueness of their actions. Here are some examples, Kat. We talk about these people all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, we just spoke about this person. 1, the acid bath murderer, John George Hay. Hay used sulfuric acid to dissolve victims' bodies, and this method made him famous and also gave him the moniker of the acid bath murderer.
Yeah.
Next one, the Axeman of New Orleans, unidentified. This killer used an axe as a weapon, coupled with his eerie letters to newspapers, made his methods iconic. Iconic, such a weird word to use for this. Next one, the Doodler. Have you ever heard of this person?
No.
The Doodler. This is an unidentified person.
Oh.
Active in the 1970s in San Francisco, this killer reportedly sketched his victims before luring them to their deaths. This is a crime chat.
I was actually just going to say that. I'm going to write that down.
Yes. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And you know what? This may be a video crime chat, meaning that they have to show people the... You want to do that?
Yeah.
2025.
2025, baby.
Okay, number 3, behavior or motive. Some nicknames capture the psychological profile or unusual habits of the killer, giving insight into their motives, such as The Vampire of Sacramento.
Hey, that sounds familiar.
We just went over it. Richard Chase. Chase's obsession with drinking the blood of his victims highlighted his bizarre and terrifying delusions. Next one, the dating game killer.
Ding, 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 ding,
Rodney
ding, ding.
Ocala.
I just saw that on Very Scary People. They covered Rodney Ocala and showed the real footage from the dating game that he was in. And she's like, I'm a food. What would you do with me? He's like, I'd be a banana and I'd peel you. And I just got the creeps. So creepy.
You said what did you compare him to recently?
Oh, the
vampire.
We were talking about the vampire, the real person that had their own reality show.
Don Henry.
Yes, and I was like, I thought he looked like Rodney Ocala.
And we officially apologize, Don, because, like I said before, Rodney Ocala, to me, maybe because I just know, I did his case and I just know what he's done. He, to me, he looks like roadkill. I'm sorry. Yeah. He always had that weird, I don't know, it's a 70s thing, hair.
I know.
But his appearance on the popular TV dating show during his killing spree gave rise to the iconic name. Next one is the Cannibal of Milwaukee, Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer's acts of cannibalism became a defining element in his crimes. Number 4, physical traits or characteristics. Occasionally, a killer's physical appearance or habits become the basis of their nickname, like the BTK killer. Yeah. Dennis Rader. Yeah. Short for bind,
torture, kill. We did that.
We also bind, did this torture, one as well. Kill. This nickname was derived from Rader's own description of his crimes in a letter to the media. Number 2, the killer clown, John Wayne Gacy. Gacy's role as a children's party clown, Pongo, contrasted horrifically with his murders of at least 33 boys. The next one, the Iceman. Yeah. You ever heard of the Iceman?
Yeah, they just covered that on Very Scary People, too. I just saw that episode on there. They're covering everybody. That's like...
Are they really?
Yeah, like some we've already covered, some we've talked about. Then others, I was like, that's a good idea. The other one I just watched was on Bueno Año. We did a female serial killer, Judy, Bueno Año. We did her. Yeah, and her moniker was the Black Widow.
That's right. That's right. Now, the Iceman, Richard Kurlinski, as a contract killer, he was like mob related. I don't know anything about this guy. So, okay. So he's a contracted killer. Richard froze his victims, the bodies, so to obscure the time of death. So they went over all of this in Very Scary People.
They did, yeah. And he was also kind of just like the two-faced a little bit, like John Wayne Gacy was. You know, you're a family man. Yeah. And his wife and his children had no idea that he was doing any of this.
I'm sorry, there's no effing way I would not know something was up. Something weird was up. Yeah. You know, there is a culture of... Maybe I can't go after Italian. I am half Italian, but I can't go after Italians in this way because, you know what? It's not just Italians. Many cultures have that, well, you know, don't ask about my business. I think the famous movie, The Godfather, literally has that scene where his wife comes in and says, did you hurt him? And he lies to her. And he's like, no, I didn't hurt him. Don't ever ask me about my business again. Yeah. Like, that is a legit vibe that goes through a lot of these.
Yeah. Like, you know. And I think that I want to say it's probably related to society and culture at the time, too, where I would say the heavy mob days, even getting up into the 80s, women were still expected to be at home cooking, making babies, and doing all the domestic things. And that's when the man would come and put them in their place, saying, you will never ask me about what I do outside this business. Do you have food? Do you have a home? Do you have all the things that you want? And
that would not.
I think it's just related more so to that societal or culturally at the time. Not saying that it was acceptable. I'm just saying it's just part of it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, a lot of housewives or women at that point were more than okay to go along with it because their financial needs were met.
Exactly. Yep. I won't ask how you bring the money. Just make sure that we have a goose and a duck and a big old fat turkey for Christmas dinner.
What movie?
You know.
What movie was that? The Goodfellas, where the wife is like, "I need this much money."
Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, Goodfellas.
Okay. All right, moving on. So number 5, sensationalism. Media-driven nicknames are often dramatic and eerie, designed to sell stories and capture the public's attention. These names often amplify the killer's notoriety, like the Zodiac Killer.
Sure.
This person is not identified, but there is a theory. Have you ever seen the TikTok guy? That he's related to the Zodiac. He's like the nephew, and he has he has painted a picture, and there are profiles and police that have looked into his family to figure it out.
And the uncle's passed now, right? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I have.
So, named after a cryptic Zodiac-themed letter he sent to the newspaper during his killing spree, just like BTK you mentioned before. Like, they kind of got ahead of that and said, no, this is what you're going to call me from now on.
Yep.
Next one, the Grim Sleeper, Lonnie Franklin Jr., have we spoken about this person?
Yes, the name sounds familiar, and the Grim Sleeper isn't really jumping out at me, but I do recognize the name, and I believe we have talked about him before. We just might need to jot that one down too. Yeah.
A years-long break between killings gave rise to this chilling name. Oh, because he was sleeping for a little bit.
He had a little, what do they call it? The in between a cool-off period. He was cold. He was cold.
And the next one, Jack the Ripper, unidentified. Yes. One of history's most infamous nicknames, drawn from an anonymous letter allegedly written by the killer. Number 6, cultural and historical references. During a mythology, folklore, or popular culture, some nicknames create a mythical aura around the killer, creeping into the public consciousness. And trust me, we can't forget the next 3.
Oh.
So, number 1, the werewolf of Wisteria, Albert Fish.
Yep.
A reference to Fish's animalistic tendencies and his association with the supernatural werewolf myth. Next one, the Pied Piper of Tucson, Charles Schmidt. Known for luring teenagers into his orbit, his nickname draws from the myth of the Pied Piper who led children to their doom. Didn't the Pied Piper used to lead rats, though?
Yes.
That's the story.
Yeah.
He didn't get paid, so he led their children away. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, next one. The Angel of Death. Multiple killers, including Charles Cullen, a reference to killers operating in medical settings who claimed to end suffering by murdering patients.
Yes. That was the other one. Was it Charles Cullen, though? He was a doctor.
Kevorkian?
And the name isn't jumping out at me, but it's basically, he was a doctor, but he was a practicing EMT. He's like, I wanted to take a break from doctoring. So he became a paramedic and was killing patients. Well, not just patients. He also was poisoning his coworkers.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and look at that one. I don't remember the name.
And number 7, police or media coinage. So sometimes law enforcement creates nicknames to aid public awareness, which is then adopted by the media. Here are some examples of that. Number 1, the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. Named for the river near Seattle, Washington, where many of his victims found.
Yep.
Next one is the Atlanta Child Killer, Wayne Williams. You went over this. You discussed this.
Yeah.
Coined during an investigation into a series of murders of children and young adults in Atlanta in the late 1970s, early 1980s.
Mindhunter, we need you to close out that story. Thanks.
He hasn't closed that one out yet. Oh.
I want to say they just caught Wayne Williams in Mindhunter, and they were still talking to Ed Kemper, and BTK was just coming out, they were still starting to profile. It's just, wanting more.
Wow. And the last one, the Hillside Stranglers,
yes.
Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono, named for the locations where victims were found along the hillsides in Los Angeles.
And they were cousins, I believe. Yeah.
They get brought up a lot. I think they were brought up during our episode with Richard Chase, too.
Yeah.
He idolized them.
Yeah.
Okay, so now there's an ongoing ethical debate, glamorization versus awareness.
Yeah.
While these nicknames create memorable narratives, they also raise ethical concerns, such as glamorization of the killers. Names like Jack the Ripper or the Night Stalker can inadvertently romanticize heinous crimes. Number 2, overshadowing of victims. The focus then shifts from the victims to the killer.
Right, yeah.
And then it reduces the story of the victims. And also number 3, public fear. Sensationalized names can help the killer's scope of power, feeding unnecessary fear into the public image. So, this is an ego boost. When the public is afraid of them.
Yep, it sure is.
So the 7 key elements that shape a serial killer nicknames: location, method, killing, behavior, motive, physical traits, sensationalism, cultural references, and media or police, all highlight the storytelling to help the public's need to understand these crimes. However, these nicknames often come at a cost of dehumanizing the victims and aiding to the killer's infamy. Today, many media outlets strive for greater sensitivity in reporting. Victim-centered storytelling and avoiding glorification of the killers have become priorities. However, nicknames continue to captivate audiences and cement the killer's place in criminal history. So I think today a lot of journalists will not say the name. They'll be like, I'm not saying this person's name. This person doesn't deserve... And it was just happening now in New York. 2 people were burned alive. Well, no, 1 person survived, 1 person died. Right. Succumbed to their flames. Yeah. And we didn't know who this person was till I think recently, like today, the second person that burned the guy, which is the most recent case, they didn't disclose his name. And I think it's less focused on the killer and what they're going to do next. And, oh my God. And da-da-da-da. It's like, no, somebody died.
Yeah. You think of media, you'll automatically think of sensationalism. So when I used to work in public relations, we would do media training and stuff with people in the Air Force, commanders and that kind of thing. One of the questions that my boss at the time would always ask is, all the news stations are sensational, but what do you think is the most sensational news program? The Weather Channel, because it's always the storm of the century. It's the 1,000-year flood. It really is, because people are like, oh no, it's a natural disaster, versus thinking like, news, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Right, but I think that's why in 2024, 2025, legacy news has lost all credibility. So that's why the Joe Rogans and all these other independent, he's not a journalist.
No. Yeah.
He's just a dude that we all can relate to, asking questions we would ask. Right. And he won't give us a 20-minute segment. He'll give 3 hours, 4 hours, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to get back to that. We need to get back to the 60-minute, 60 minutes. Yeah. I'm going to ask you whatever the hell I want to ask you. And it's not going to be something. It's going to be questions.
It'll be hard questions. Yeah.
Real journalism.
Right.
But I don't know.
Well, thank you for that intro. And like much of your list, the story that we're going to cover for today does have a moniker. It is the Glamour Girl Slayer, also known as Harvey Murray Glattman. And our first crime and cosmetics segment of 2025, because a kind of who he targets.
Pretty girls.
Oh, yeah.
Models.
Yep.
Glamour girls.
Glamour girls. Harvey Glattman was a television repairman, amateur photographer, and convict. He was a slender, meek, and intelligent but mentally ill man who would encourage female models to pose, bound and gagged, by saying that it was for a detective magazine. But by being bound like this, these women were at his mercy. He then raped them repeatedly, gloated over them for some time, and eventually strangled them using the same piece of rope. He also took a trophy after each crime, tying him back to each of his victims, and or pictures of them after he killed them, nude, displayed as they were. We'll gotta get into that. Until his last victim, who got the best of him. This Crime Cosmetics segment covers a sadomasochistic murderer who claimed 3 victims, but there could have been more. Let's take a journey into the mind of Harvey Murray Glattman, a.k.a. the Glamour Girl Slayer. Harvey was born December 10th, 1927, and was the only child of Albert and Ophelia Glattman. I love that name, Ophelia. I adore that name.
Beautiful name.
It wasn't long after Ophelia gave birth that she began to notice that Harvey wasn't quite there. As one author put it, quote, his popcorn bag might contain a few too many unpopped kernels, end quotes. Harvey's father, Albert, he was a milliner, aka a hat maker. He spent most of his time running his shop, which was in the heart of the Bronx, in the garment district. Albert was a little slower to kind of catch on the things that Harvey was doing, but he also too began to notice some strange things as Harvey the infant turned into Harvey the toddler, and then Harvey the toddler turned into the skinny, sulking, indefensible boy. Something was going on here.
Yeah.
In 1930, the Glattman family lived briefly in Denver, Colorado before moving back to New York. Ophelia was sensitive to Harvey's mood swings, odd behaviors, but Albert, who was a believer in discipline as a fundamental to anything, took to spankings, assorted, mild punishments as a means to calm down these mood swings and odd behaviors. Mm-hmm. At first, Ophelia couldn't put her finger on what was wrong. Harvey just acted weird. There was nothing definite except that he giggled when there was nothing to giggle about or cry over nothing. He showed little interest in doing anything, had a short attention span, often daydreamed. And as Harvey got older, he didn't seem to really want friends.
Oh, Okay.
Ophelia and Albert first noticed something a little off when Harvey was about 4 years old. Ophelia walked in on Harvey in his bedroom in what would be considered sadomasochism at 4 years old. Ophelia testified at his trial in 1958, and she said, quote, "He tied a string around his penis, placed the loose end in a drawer, and then leaned back against the string," end quote. He was 4 years old.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Albert and Ophelia had no idea what the string actually represented. It was a neurosis, both a form of punishment and self-chastisement, that would grow into very, very dangerous proportions. A rope would eventually replace the string, and the rope would become his fixation. Biographer Michael Newton said, quote, "The rope fetish would dog Harvey throughout his life and ultimately land him on death row," end quote. So keep that little nugget up there, the rope.
Yeah.
At the time Ophelia discovered the sadomasochism acts, she and Albert decided to overlook it as a quirk of an inquisitive, exploring young boy. If they reacted at all, it was with mild disapproval and a stern talking to, like, "You ought not do that there, Harvey." For example, Albert caught Harvey masturbating and warned him that masturbation causes acne. Like, you should be doing that. You're going to get pimples all over your face. Harvey's problems were kept indoors for years. To the outside world, neighbors thought him as a merely shy and studious young boy. Harvey started school in 1933. He was well-behaved, quiet, a good student, and in fact, he excelled in many subjects. In school, Harvey had a few friends who consisted of a small, lunchtime group. He always ate with, the same people. Sometimes they would go outside in the playground and, toss a ball back and forth and whatnot. But he was afraid of girls. And when he was in the presence of girls, he got wobbly in the knees and his face would flush with embarrassment. And it didn't help that a few of them, and some of the boys too, ridiculed him about his overdeveloped ears. He had big ears and buck teeth. And then, of course, eventually also get acne and scarring on his face. Behind his back, they did this, but often to his face, they called him Chipmunk or Weasel. This is throwing and giving me Pee Wee Gaskins vibes from that story. Pee Wee Gaskins was also kind of really small and got picked on a lot for his small stature. Chatters want to go back and check that out. That was from season 1, episode 18. Can you believe that was that long ago? It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. And that was a chatter request. Yeah. Now, Harvey, for the most part, was a loner. He never really joined others for after-school programs, games. He just ran home and played on his own. And it was sexual. It involved a rope. Harvey's favorite pastime was tying a rope around his neck, looping the free end over a pipe or a rafter, and then yanking the rope with one hand while masturbating with the other. These strange feelings gave him a rush like anything else. So he's tightening the rope with one hand and he's masturbating with the other hand. Michael Newton, the biographer, he explained in his 1998 book called Rope, Harvey's sex game, variously known as autoerotic asphyxia, asphyxiophilia, or hypoxyphilippa, is not the same thing as masochism. And it involves self-induced strangulation or suffocation during masturbation. So it's more of an autoerotic asphyxia but it's still, what he would do is sadomasochistic, but the gasping appears to be an ancient practice. The asphyxiation itself creates excitement and eventually a euphoria even without genital stimulation, but due to the adrenalines produced, the human body perceives it as a life-threatening situation. And sometimes they kill themselves and they don't realize it. There was a few scenes that we responded to that it was part of an auto-asphyxiation where they killed themselves.
Yeah.
There was no safety measure in place for a rope or whatever, however they did it.
Can you slag my face I just... Yeah. No, this is so off the charts. Not okay. I don't know. But people convince themselves it is.
Yeah. So the next section is a time span from 1937 to 1944. The Glatmans returned to Denver again in 1938 and moved in with Ophelia's sister, Rosalie Gold, another name. I love Rosalie. Harvey learned to play the cornet in the high school concert band, and he was also a Boy Scout. They had been happy with Harvey's school grades there, and in fact, he seemed to adjust well to his new school and in the neighborhood. But they came home one night after an evening of shopping to find the boy's neck was swollen and rope burned. He didn't leave this behind in the Bronx. He brought it with him. He was only 11 at the time, and he confessed what he had been doing.
I'm so, disturbed by this. First of all, if you heard, I think we have so many fancy names to go along with this. I have to describe it. But if a child at 11 was cutting or harming themselves, this is the same thing. He is hurting himself horribly. Like, I mean, on the verge of, like, it's...
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how long Harvey had actually been playing this game isn't really known. Another author, Joseph Geringer, wrote, quote, "Everything translated in Harvey's brain as a Freudian piece of work. Everything was sexual. Overcome with sex and frightened as hell of his libido, he had no idea what he was doing in life or where he fit in the scheme. Females who tickled his male desires perplexed him because they threatened to remind him of his own confusion and his non-existence. They were his enemies," end quote. Pornographic magazines of naked women were found under his bed, and masturbation, but that's just one thing. The autoerotic asphyxia was another. So Albert Nephilia consulted a doctor who would say Harvey's erratic playtime was merely growing pains.
Oh my God.
Oh, he'll grow out of it.
Get a second opinion. What? Oh my God, that's terrible.
It's just growing pains. Jeez. No, my knees that hurt 24/7 are growing pains.
That is certainly not growing pains. Wow.
So as Harvey entered junior high in 1939, life seemed to kind of turn back around to normal for the Glatmans. Really, this meant that Harvey was more cautious not to get caught. He attended school regularly and was a great student. However, now as a teenager, Harvey's fear of girls increased. Plus, his case of acne didn't help his confidence. He was masturbating too much. Harvey faltered in the presence of girls. He turned red and felt inadequate, yet they were somewhat magnetic to him. He longed to touch them. This beloved rope that he would have would also help him achieve this fantasy. By the mid-1940s, Harvey attended Denver East High School, where he was in the top 7th percentile of his class. During his senior year, he started binding, gagging, and molesting Denver women while robbing them of small amounts of money.
Wow, that escalated.
Yes. Well, leaving the now tiresome solitude of a locked bathroom and bedroom at home, he got some new excitement of breaking and entering private residences. From most of these, he would steal something, really anything, just to kind of get something away for it, just for kicks. One of his prize plunders that he found was a .26 caliber handgun, uncovered from someone's dining room bureau. He stole the gun from their house. Not all of his break-ins were random. Sometimes he was more particular. So on May 4th, 1945, Harvey acted on his fantasy when he bound, gagged, molested, and robbed Eula Jo Hand and 2 other women in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Denver. Unable to see humanity in any type of female form, women became more fantasy toys that he wished he could understand and that he wished to kind of overcome and conquer. Therefore, violence was the only way to approach them. He's like, I can't talk to them, so I got to make them do what I want them to do. That way they wouldn't laugh at him, and they would have to do what he says. He could walk away afterwards, and at least having proven to himself that he could claim some trophies in life, even if it was by force. He would spot a pretty woman on Denver streets, follow her home. Once assured of her address, he would climb through a window or maybe sneak up like a back staircase. And then once inside, he forced his victims into their bedrooms, tied their hands with a rope he carried in his jacket, muzzled their mouths with a gag cloth. Now, the gag cloth is obviously to silence their screams. He also discovered his rope became a thrill, and it wasn't really just for binding, but how he bound them. Their arms were pinned back. He touched their bodies without disruption. So as they were tied, with this favorite rope, he was able and he felt free to grope the women. They were now at his mercy versus Harvey being at the mercy of all these girls who picked on him and called him names. Tying victims to the bed or a chair, he would unbutton their blouses, loosen their skirts, fondle their bodies, and at times Harvey made them lie down next to him and pretend to enjoy it as much as he did.
That must have been terrifying.
Oh, God. There was another, Rodney Acali, the last one that he kidnapped, where he raped the girl. She was 17 or something like that. He raped her, and she fed into him going, I know you didn't mean to. It was my fault, blah, 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 blah. But as soon as she got a chance to get away, she booked it out of there, but she basically told him what he wanted to hear. So the more women that he fondled, the more Harvey became comfortable in their presence, and he started to become the man he wanted to be. Or did he? So during this time when Harvey is still in high school, when Harvey is not home, Ophelia and Albert noticed he wasn't coming home from school. And sometimes when he come home, it would be really late. And what Harvey said is it was scholastic extracurricular activities. basically covering up his peculiar thrills after hours. Michael Newton, the biographer I mentioned earlier, wrote, quote, "He was a pioneer of sorts. 9 years before author John Brophy coined the term serial killer, nearly 2 decades before FBI agent Robert Ressler dusted it off and made the tag a household word, Harvey was already plying his trade. Harvey never had a catchy nickname, but he has since then, the Glamour Girl Slayer, and he's got another one. But then the stuff of the urban myth, the quintessential boogeyman, is kind of what he was," end quote. So May 18th, 1945, Harvey was arrested. May 4th is Eulojo Hand was his first victim. So May 18th, 1945, he was arrested for the first time. Many to come. Police caught him in the act of breaking into the Vrain Street apartment window of Alma Hammam. In his pockets, they found rope, a .25 caliber pistol, and under interrogation that evening, he confessed to a number of burglaries in the Denver area and for the quote-unquote robbery of Eulojo Hand and the 2 other women that he did that night on May 4th. He was confined in the Denver County Jail and reportedly didn't even graduate from high school because he was in jail. He was supposed to be graduating. May 21st, Ophelia bailed him out, paying $2,000 in 3 separate checks. However, Harvey did not learn his lesson. On July 15th, 1945, like 2 months later, while out on bond, Harvey abducted, bound, gagged, molested, and robbed Noreen Lauer in Boulder, Colorado.
Wow.
After binding her, he drove her out of town to Sunshine Canyon. There, he repeated his routine performance of showing and touching, not raping, but before returning her to Denver, well before dawn, she went straight to the police station where she looked at a bunch of mugshots and she was able to identify him.
Oh, okay.
So 2 days later, July 17th, Harvey was arrested in Denver for his Boulder assault on Noreen Lauer. He was transported back to Boulder and confined at the Boulder County Jail, and he was 17 years old at this time. Like I said, he was about to graduate high school, Yeah. July 23rd, 4 days later, Harvey was released from the Boulder jail after a bondsman paid $5,000 bail. July 31st, Harvey's bond on the Lauer case was reduced to $2,000, and he was committed to the Colorado Psychiatric Hospital in Denver for evaluation, where he was confined until September 8th, 1945. During his stay in the Colorado State Prison, he was treated by a psychiatrist, and once he was released, his parents would have him treated then by a private psychiatrist, which is good.
Yeah.
The intentions were good. So he gets out September 8th, September 27th, while out of the hospital and on bond from both the Denver and Boulder cases now. Harvey bound, gagged, molested, and robbed 2 in the Park Hill neighborhood of Denver. He also molested another Denver woman who actually ended up screaming and running out of her house, so she got away. 3 days later, he was arrested for the 3rd time in Denver for the Park Hill neighborhood assaults. So from September 30th, 1945 to October 8th, he was confined in the Denver County Jail. While he was there on October 8th, he was ordered by the court to go back to the psychopathic hospital for a period not exceeding 10 days. But he only had to go back for less than 10 days. And on the same day, the court did release the $2,000 bond on Eulojo Hand and the other 2 women's cases from the first one from Denver.
Okay.
November 4th, Harvey's 3rd charge, the Park Hill assaults, was completely dismissed. They dropped all the charges.
Wow.
Yep. November 19th, 1945, Harvey pled guilty in Denver to the case of Eulojo Hand and the 2 other women. Dr. Hilton was his only defense witness and recommended insulin shock treatments. That was his psychiatrist.
Okay.
So November 26th, Harvey appeared at a hearing in Boulder, Colorado on the Noreen Lauer case, which was continued because of his conviction in the Eulojo Hand. So I guess they had to continue it on for another time because he was doing time for this one. December 1st, 1945, Harvey was sentenced for 1 to 5 years at the Colorado State Penitentiary. December 5th is when he actually began his first prison term as prisoner number 23863, Colorado State Penitentiary. Fast forward about seven months, July 27th, 1946, Harvey was paroled.
How
from his 1 to 5 year term at the Colorado State.
No.
Good behavior. It was less than 8 months of his 1 to 5 year sentence. One of the first things his mother did was bring him to a psychiatrist and recommended that Harvey's problem was based on an abnormal fear of the opposite sex. You know what the solution was?
What?
He told Harvey to engage in activities such as dancing that would get him used to being around women to minimize his fear of them.
Convicted molester, sexual offender, rapist,
sexual
all these
offender,
things. And dancing.
Yeah.
How he's walking free right now is beyond me. But I don't know anything anymore.
So he was out on parole in July of 1946, and then from July to August of 1946, while out on parole, still under the $2,000 bond from his assault on Noreen Lauer, He moved back to New York State. He was encouraged to do this by his mother because of the stigma around him in the Denver area of being a molester and robbing people.
That's what he was.
Well, yeah. She wholeheartedly felt that he could get a fresh start in a new area, among new faces, meet some nice people, get a job, and make something of himself. However, Ophelia actually went with Harvey to New York, helped him move in and everything. Albert stayed home. She set him up in a Yonkers apartment. When he was in prison, he learned how to fix televisions. Ophelia told him, hey, you could get a job by this trade that you learned while you were in prison. And then he also wanted to become an amateur photographer. He was very interested in photography and wanted to give that a go. So with this in mind, Ophelia was convinced that Harvey was on his path, like on the right path, and she returned back to Denver. However, Mama left and Harvey took to the streets, participating in many activities that involved women based on what the psychiatrist was recommending. However, not the good kind that psychiatrists had in mind. Since he's convicted, right, possessing a gun would send him back to prison, he bought a cap gun from a 5 and dime store that he thought looked authentic enough to pass for a real gun. He also had a pocket knife that he carried, and, of course, the rope. That was his favorite. Armed and confident, he committed several more robberies and assaults on women. Back in New York. August 17, 1946, lovers Thomas Starrow and Doris Thorne were approached by a man they later described as being a bit shorter than 6 foot, 140 pounds, with messy hair, horn-rimmed glasses, large ears, and acne scars. The stranger brandished a pistol, the cap gun, and ordered the couple off the sidewalk into the darkness under a grove of trees. Removing Thomas's wallet from his trousers, Harvey tied his legs together and made him lie down on the lawn. Turning to Doris, he began to touch her breasts, kept her in place by brandishing the gun and kind of threatening her, like kept her quiet. Completely fixated on Doris, Harvey failed to see that Thomas actually was working himself free from the knot and was starting to tiptoe up behind Harvey. Thomas grabbed Harvey, but Harvey did break free and brandished the pocket knife. With a slash, he did catch Thomas's shoulder, like in the scuffle. It wasn't lethal, but it scared Harvey enough when he stabbed at Thomas to run away.
Yeah.
And he didn't stop running until he was safe on the first train to Albany. So, like, he ran straight to a train station. But way to go, Thomas. Good scuffle. So in Albany, August 22nd, 1946, he found a new apartment. And instead of changing his ways, he immediately began to scour the area for his next undertaking.
Where's the parole officer?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Like, I think maybe this was before we had so many regulations put in place to monitor these people. Wow. This is crazy. Yeah. I would have beat his ass, though.
I'd put him back in jail. Fucking motherfucker. His first victim in Albany was an off-duty nurse, Florence Hayden. He came up from behind her in the darkness, grabbed her purse straps, and shoved her into an adjacent yard. Struggling to keep a hold of Florence, Harvey dug his gun barrel in her side and demanded that she stayed quiet while he bound her wrists together. But she would later tell police, quote, I realized he was using both his hands to tie the rope and no longer was holding the gun. So I wheeled around, pushed him hard, and screamed, but loud. End quote. Yeah. So kind of like he's tying her down. He's like, wait a minute, he doesn't have the gun anymore. This is my chance.
Yeah.
Florence said that Harvey appeared to be more frightened than she was. And he fled. Like when she pushed him and everything like that, he was like, I'm out of here.
Right.
He's scared
afraid
of the
women.
girls.
Afraid of women.
Yeah. The following evening, he was determined to succeed as his irresistible libido intensified. Impulsively, Harvey went after unescorted females who were passing by. There were 2 women walking together, Evelyn Burge and Beverly Goldstein. He cornered them on a deserted street and then held by his cap gun. Harvey did lose his nerve. He was mumbling and fumbling. He ordered them to hand over their purses. They agreed, and he just took the purses and left. So it's like I don't think he knows what he wants to do, but he wants to do something to give him power. And so far, I mean, for the most part, he's striking out.
Yeah.
But the Albany Police Department noticed, and they had some sort of like phantom that was assaulting women, right? So his modus operandi was striking at women, which was a huge concern for then the police commissioner, James Kerwin. Descriptions given to authorities by Florence Hayden, Evelyn Burge, and Beverly Goldstein matched. Having already attempted to sexually molest the nurse, Florence, the commissioner quickly gave the order to hunt him down. The department needed to move quick. August 25th, 1946, Harvey was arrested.
Yay.
They found him, confined in jail in Albany, New York. What happened was 2 officers spotted him after seeing the suspect. It was like, hey, he matches the description of the guy that we're looking for.
Right.
Well, Harvey was following a woman down a street, Western Avenue. Police saw him. They stopped him, frisked him. They found a toy gun, the pocket knife, and a roll of rope. He was scared, so he confessed. Now, Yonkers authorities requested for Harvey to be returned so he could face charges for him in the attack of the lovers Thomas and Doris. However, Albany kind of wanted to bask in their capture a bit longer, like, hey, we got this sucker. So they actually declined to return him to Yonkers at this time. Harvey was indicted at Albany's municipal court for the attack on Florence Hayden. So even though the other women, Evelyn and Beverly, did not file charges, the city district attorney knew that Harvey Glattman was the guy they were looking for. They also started to look into him and see that he's done this in Colorado. He was no small-time opportunistic criminal. Suddenly, Harvey now started to kind of face some serious prison time. When Ophelia and Albert found out about this, they were shocked. They thought when he moved to New York, he was reformed. He was living clean. He was on the right path. And they thought that he was still in Yonkers. They didn't know he was in Albany. October 10th, 1946, Harvey was sentenced again 1 to 5 years for his first New York robberies and assaults. Because Harvey was not yet 21, Judge Earl Gallup recommended that he begin his term in the Elmira, New York Reformatory, but in due course committed to serve the remainder at Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison. Until you're the age of 21, then we're going to send you to Sing Sing.
Okay.
So October 24th, Harvey entered the New York State Reception Center at Elmira as prisoner number 48337, where he would stay for almost 2 years. During that time, he was medically researched and evaluated. Dr. Ralph Ryankow diagnosed Harvey as, quote, a psychopathic personality schizophrenic type, end quote, having, quote, sexually perverted impulses as the basis of his criminality, end quote. He strongly recommended that further studies on Harvey be done once he actually went to Sing Sing. So he was in the reformatory now, but there's when he gets to Sing Sing, he still needs to be evaluated. On October 28, 1946, Harvey's bail on the Boulder case of Noreen Lauer was reduced again from $2,000 to $500. The case was continued until his release from New York authorities, so they still wanted to charge him in this Noreen Lauer case. So September 8, 1948, he finishes his time at the reformatory and he's transferred to Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York, and once again received psychiatric care. Unfortunately, apparently, there's no records of his psychiatric examinations at Sing Sing, apart from some of the case study and discussions that have happened. But there was a report that did come up and says that he was, quote, not definitely mental defective or psychotic, end quote, but suggests that he could be psychoeducated and, if still antisocial, should be segregated, even if schizophrenia does not seem to develop. It was weird.
Yeah, that's very weird.
Yeah, and it was almost opposite of what the other psychiatrist was saying when he was in the reformatory.
Yeah, not every doctor is quality stuff. I mean, some people just suck
True.
at their job, and it seems like the previous doctor kind of called it as he saw it. This guy is not really, I don't know what the hell he's doing. That's not.
Well, nevertheless, he was a model prisoner, and he was granted an early release.
So is Ed Kemper.
He had a high IQ. Demonstrated the ability and eagerness in his prison duties, and responded positively to sporadic medical examinations. So November 27th, 1950, a Boulder judge dismissed the case of Noreen Lauer so Harvey could be paroled from Sing Sing.
Who gave Who gave this judge the right to dismiss such a case? Who the hell are you to ignore the victims like that? Ooh, that pisses me off. Ooh.
I know.
And you know what? He should at least get that drug Lupin. You know that drug that takes away erections that they give sex offenders?
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. I didn't know they did that.
You do not get an erection. You are no longer allowed to have it.
Harvey played this game very well. I mean, he sold this judge on I'm a good prisoner. He's okay, well, we'll drop these charges. You don't need to go face that. He did have benefits accruing from good behavior, which severed his time off the minimum 5 year to only the 2 years. Harvey Glattman was paroled. However, there were some stipulations. He was to return to his parents' custody in Denver. He had to acquire a full-time job, and he had to remain under court observation for another 4.5 years, so parole.
Okay, finally.
Yeah. April 16th, 1951. Now, as soon as Harvey was released, he was immediately arrested and jailed again for his outstanding charges from 1946 2 of them were dismissed and 1 was suspended, so then he was free again. So it was really quick. Like, he gets out and they're like, we've got some missed charges. We're going to drop all these charges against you.
They are not protecting the public. They are not protecting women in the public. And I'm so...
I know. So, May 2nd, as ordered by his stipulations, he returned to Denver, and he was under the care of Dr. Franklin Edbaugh, a psychiatrist. Records show that he had some spotty employment, didn't really get the full-time job that he was required to do, but he said he was just having a difficult time adjusting to working full-time. I'm so used to not to having to work. Now I got to work full-time? In 1952, shortly after he returned home, less than a year, his father, Albert, died. Harvey was living with his parents at the time, but after his father died, he moved out because Harvey and Ophelia began to argue and fight. He found his own apartment, he continued in on-again, off-again employment, and his parole visits were regular and on time. So as far as everybody, like, he's trying, he's doing his own thing, he's got his own place. Like, we're watching you, but you're showing up on time, you're not blowing off your parole meetings, anything like that.
Okay.
April 8th, 1954, the body of a Jane Doe was found west of Boulder. If Harvey committed any crimes in Colorado between the time that he was forced to go live with his parents, 1951 to 1957, if it included murdering of a Jane Doe, he was never charged or caught for it. September of 1956, Harvey received full liberty. He was released from parole. You're good to go. With no more monthly updates to complete, no more authority-contrived checkups, like no more mental evaluations, and it's what he'd been wanting for years. He wanted to put Denver and Ophelia and the courts and the police and the charges, he wanted to put that all behind him. So, New York was no longer an option. January 1957, he moved to California, although he occasionally did return to Denver to visit his mother. Eventually, he settled in Los Angeles, found an apartment, bought a car, opened up a small TV repair shop. He was pretty much a recluse initially and avoiding social contact with the opposite sex until his psyche started to stir. He went back to an old hobby, photography. He did well in art class, and when he was in school, like I mentioned, he really was interested in photography, and he was captivated by being able to capture the world around him and the women. Harvey started trolling around modeling agencies looking to take pictures of, aka satisfy his violent sexual urges. He would contact them with offers for work for these pulp fiction magazines, take them back to his apartment, tie them up, rape them. And then there was a camera, which brought even greater pleasure because it recorded these events and these conquests and reminded him how far he could actually go with a woman and the length of a rope. So the biographer Michael Newton said, quote, "The photos that resulted from a shoot, his photo shoot, allowed Harvey to relive the incident, elaborate the fantasy while masturbating. The camera also was a shield, something for Harvey to hide behind. It gave him a distance that shrank models into a manageable size and let him steal, if not their souls, at least their sexuality," end quote. And I thought that was really a great way to put it. Like,
yeah, that's disturbing beyond disturbing.
Oh, no, absolutely disturbing. So, agreeing with Michael Newton's assessment that Harvey's strange fabric equals those of other more famous murderers to come, such as the Boston Strangler, Hillside Stranglers, Ted Bundy, British author and crime historian Colin Wilson attests, quote, "To understand Harvey Glattman is to understand the basic psychology of the serial killer," end quote. Now, armed with a car, camera, and cash, all he needed was a fake name. One that gave a professional representation of a professional photographer. He chose John Glenn. Is that studious? What do you think?
I think that's a great name for, like, media. Yeah. 2 first names.
Yeah. For months, he hung out at model studios, snapping pictures to fulfill his sexual desires, and amazed how easily these women stripped bare for $20 an hour. But it wasn't enough. He had to touch, to have, to control, to murder. August 1st, 1957 was his first murder victim, Judith Ann Dole, in Riverside County, California. Judy Dole was a 19-year-old divorcee trying to get whatever she could to work to pay for her lawyer in a very ugly custody battle. As customary in the 1950s, Judy's name and contact information was provided by her modeling agency to potential photographers, like for a gig, to give them a job. Harvey made a house call. He told Julie that he had seen her work before and was interested in having her post for a layout in a popular true crime magazine. With this, a payment of $20 an hour, Judy accepted and would meet him at her apartment at 2 p.m. Before he hung up, Harvey said, quote, "Wear a tight skirt and sweater," end quote.
Ew, creepy.
Yeah. Harvey arrived early and asked if they could move the shoot to his studio because there was better lighting there. While agreeing, she was cautious enough not to get in the car with him and ride with him, but she did follow him in her own car to his studio, which actually was his apartment. Once inside, he explained that since the shots would accompany a story about bondage, he would have to illustrate this by tying her up. She consented. She threw her wrists in front of her as he bound them, sat back in his armchair as he wrapped her ankles, and seductively slunk into the chair. When she was fully strapped and muzzled, he drew a .32 Browning automatic from his pocket. Waving the steel blue weapon under her chin, he untied her hands and ordered her to strip, slowly, as he snapped her in various poses, some bound, some free. Like a movie director, he barked out, "You're frightened. You're curious. Be scared, but tempting. Lift a leg. Drop a strap."
Yes, yes, no, no, yes, yes.
These poses are more erotic, and Harvey found it hard to control himself. At gunpoint, Harvey raped Judy several times.
Boy.
After each session of raping, John Glenn, as he was known, a.k.a. Harvey Glattman, secured her bindings after every time. He made her sit next to him and cuddle on the couch as they watched TV. He promised Judy he would take her home after a few more episodes. He never had any intention of following through with this promise. At 10:30 p.m., he drove 125 miles out into Indio, where he photographed Judy in her underwear in the middle of a desert. Acting as if he was going to untie her hands and let her go, he took one end of the rope around her neck, affixed the other hand of the rope to her ankles. So basically, she was laying there hogtied on her belly, and her wrists and her ankles were tied together. But this was all strapped to one rope that tightened. So he pulled, and Judy's body eventually snapped.
Oh my God, you just gave me chills. All right. Ooh, I got weird visual. Okay.
I know. I'm sorry. Before burying her in a shallow grave, Harvey posed Judy's lifeless body and molded her into various positions like clay, taking her pictures, keeping a record.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
This was August 1st, 1957. So March 9th, about 6 months later, 1958, was his second murder victim, Shirley Ann Bridgeford in San Diego County, California. Shirley was a 24-year-old mother of two, recently divorced. She joined a popular Patty Sullivan Lonely Hearts Club in Los Angeles.
Wait a minute. Lonely Hearts, isn't that like an ad thing in the newspaper?
The Lonely Hearts Club, yes. He was also known as the Lonely Hearts Killer because he found her, his second victim, going to this Lonely Hearts Club to meet women.
Okay.
Looking for love in all the wrong places. She wasn't picky, Shirley, about the type of man she was looking for, only that she didn't want somebody like her ex-husband. It was pretty specific. Like, you know what not. Yeah, you know what you don't want. So when George Williams approached her and asked her out on a date, she accepted. They would have dinner and go square dancing. George Williams, a.k.a. Harvey Glattman, arrived. Another name. It was John Glenn, now George Williams. Okay. He's got one more. George Williams, a.k.a. Harvey Glattman, arrived at 7:45 p.m. and was surprisingly greeted by a house full of company at Shirley's home. He stayed calm. He played up the hope-to-be-boyfriend act. He complimented Shirley and told her company, "Nice to meet you all," as they left for their date. In the car, Harvey told Shirley he had a headache and asked if it was okay to skip square dancing and go for a nice drive through the countryside, grab some dinner while they're out on the way. Shirley said that sounded nice, and they stopped for dinner and then continued on their drive. Biographer Michael Newton said that he thought, from statements Harvey provided later, that he had not decided at this point if he was going to rape and kill Shirley. Newton said, quote, "He kept on thinking of her two children," Harvey said, telling himself that Shirley was a different type than Judy Dahl. She didn't strip and show off her body to strangers. Shirley was a nice girl. Still, her very presence in the car and the scent of her perfume excited Glattman. Harvey knew what he was missing if he did not follow through, end quote. Harvey pulled onto a dirt road near Anza State Park. Before Shirley could question Harvey, he pulled out a .32 caliber and pushed it between her breasts. He told her to undress. Although Shirley initially resisted, he forced her to undress completely. He brutally raped her and then forced her to walk in the desert where he told her he was going to take her picture. The more she pleaded to him, the more he refused and continued to take photos of her both dressed and undressed. But the light bulb on his camera actually popped. Remember the old style cameras where you had to actually physically do the bulb? Yeah, it popped. And he made her wait there until the sun came up so he could take more pictures in the daylight. He's like, well, just wait for the sun to come up. You just stay right there. I need more pictures. She, thinking that he was actually going to let her go after this, and he, now with enough images to last him a while, he strangled Shirley with a rope and killed her. As with Judy, Harvey then posed Shirley's lifeless body and took several pictures of her in various man-made positions. He was pleased with himself, and he left Shirley to rot behind a cactus.
Jesus. Oh my God. This is terrible.
I know.
Oh my God. So it's like this whole time you're describing him, like this is like clear signs that there is a difference between the male mind and a female mind. It's like there's oh my God. You're breaking my heart because
I know.
I can't get over the snap. You still got me on the snap.
on the snap, yeah. I know. Oh. So, July 24th, 1958 is murder victim number 3, Ruth Mercado, also in San Diego County, California. Part-time stripper Ruth Mercado, a.k.a. Angela Rojas, met the same fate, but this time he was more refined. Or was he? He ended up placing her body not far from Shirley's in the same park, at the Anza State Park. Soon after, Harvey then started placing ads of his own and discovered the Diane Studio, one of the highest priced but better reputed, whose models were often chosen by legitimate cameraman for magazine ads, TV commercials. It was very reputable. So he was like, okay, we're going to try this one. He went in to talk to Diane. Diane was the owner. She often posed for things herself. And of course, the studio would attract, they called them shutterbugs, basically people willing to pay money for a striptease while, quote-unquote, taking their picture.
Got it.
October 27, 1958, Harvey walked into the modeling studio and wanted to rent a model. He introduced himself this time as Frank Johnson. When he went in there, he wanted Diane herself. But she was turned off by him. He had unkempt hair, and he had a repugnant body odor, apparently. She said, sorry, I'm busy, but maybe I can get somebody else for you.
Oh, she must feel terrible.
Oh, yeah, this comes back up.
Oh, okay.
So Diane called Lorraine Vigil, a new model who just signed on to her the previous week. And Lorraine, eager for her first shoot, agreed. And Diane said, quote-unquote, Frank would pick her up at 8 p.m. After Harvey left, Diane thought about his creepiness and decided to call Lorraine back. She said, quote, be careful with this loser. He's not a professional and is rather creepy. You know what I mean? End quote. Lorraine promised that she would take care. And with Lorraine's thinking about this, she was on high alert when she got into Harvey's old Dodge that night. She watched his every move, and as he bent to release the clutch, he silently headed towards the Santa Ana freeway. She said, quote, the studio's not this way. And then he said, quote, oh, didn't I tell you? I've been preempted by another client. We're going to my private studio instead, end quote. No, Lorraine thought to herself, this is a bad signal. Like, things are kind of not starting to add up, and it began to reverberate in her head.
Yeah.
She said, quote, are you sure? He said, quote, cross my heart, as he giggled. Remember when he was a kid, he would giggle at odd times?
Yeah.
He was giggling. This was the first time that Lorraine took a very good look at his face. Even his grin was, like, creepy when he was giggling. She kept quiet, not wanting to make a fuss. This was her first job with the Diane Studio after all.
Oh my God.
And didn't want to earn bad marks like right off the bat as an unwilling client. Like, she needed the job. So as Harvey's Dodge rattled along down the freeway, past one exit ramp after another, seemingly speeding up also with the mileage, she mustered up enough nerve to ask Harvey, quote, didn't you pass it? End quote. Forget it, he yelled, but otherwise remained very close-mouthed, only staring straight ahead through the glimmering windshield. Lorraine looked at Harvey's eerie grimace, dropped her eyes to his foot, which was bearing down on the gas pedal. So, like, the more she asked, he started to get pissed. He's driving faster. And then she asked again, listen, I have to know. But he interrupted her and told her to shut up. And Lorraine said, you better tell me where we're going, or... Viciously, the car swung into a dangerous turn, grabbing the forthcoming exit. Impulsively crossing 2 lanes to take this exit, Lorraine was slammed against the door panel. She tried to sit up and her eyes caught the overhead road marker said Tustin Ranch Road. So at least she got like a location of where she was at. The car, slowing up after the spontaneous turnaround, came to a stop on the side of the road just below the off-ramp. She screamed, are you trying to kill us? He said, hold out your arms. She said, what? I said, hold out your arms. You're getting on my nerves. I'm going to tie you and shut you up. So Harvey pulled out his gun, watched Lorraine's eyes widen, like, holy shit, this is happening.
Yeah.
She grabbed the door handle in an attempt to flee, but Harvey did grab her in time so she couldn't get out. He yanked her back into him, wrapped her body, twisting her around in motion, tying the rope around her body that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Like, she had no idea where this rope even came from. Now, he hadn't actually expected her to fight. He was yelling at her, stay still, and tried like hell to keep her away from the car door from escaping. She continued to wrestle him until both of his hands were wrapped on the gun barrel. In one awkward reflex, the pistol went off and a bullet seared through Lorraine's skirt, skimming her thigh. The noise jolted Harvey enough, and he involuntarily released her. Like, it went off and it scared him.
Chicken shit. He's a chicken shit.
He is, yeah. But thinking fast at seeing him let go of her, she kicked the door handle and the door bounced open. She pushed herself out with it, landed on the gravel. She could also feel him behind it, like he was going after her.
Right.
Then he could feel her hands on her sweater as she's trying to run away and trying to get her back inside the car. Just as she felt herself being reeled in, headlights. They were the headlights of a police sedan. Lorraine ran to it and realized for the first time she still held onto her attacker's pistol, like she still had the gun. She dropped it before the two policemen emerged from the vehicle and fell at their feet, sobbing. Wow. Now, as for Harvey Glattman, he cowered beside his car. He was whimpering, mumbling, how it wasn't his fault. He had no control. It's out of my control. I just have to do this. He told Highway Patrolman Tom Mulligan, who later testified, quote, "He had a lunatic stare. I'll never forget that wild look that he had in his eyes," end quote.
Oh, my Lord. Oh, my God. Thank God. Thank God they were driving down the road. Oh, my God.
So he was arrested then, but October 31st, he was also arrested for the murders of Shirley Bridgeford and Ruth Mercado, but not for Judy Dull. Harvey became known in the media as the Lonely Hearts Killer and the Glamour Girl Slayer. His attorney, Willard Whittinghill, was quoted calling Harvey a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of personality. So November 4th, 1958, Boulder County Sheriff Art Everson sent his Jane Doe case to the California authorities. That was the one, remember, like from 1951 to 1957. Like, there was a Jane Doe, but it was very similar to the circumstances. They just didn't know who she was.
Right.
So they began to question Harvey about the details in this Jane Doe case, even though there's no record that they actually ever did. Boulder authorities suspected Harvey in this slaying of the Boulder Jane Doe, a victim whose corpse was discovered by hikers in 1954. Her identity remained a mystery for 55 years until our favorite thing.
Oh, DNA.
Genetic genealogy. In October 2009, Sheriff's Office was notified by Dr. Terry Melton of Mitotyping Technologies in State College, Pennsylvania, that her lab had made a match between Jane Doe's DNA profile and that of a woman who thought the unidentified murder victim might be her long-lost sister. The positive identification of Boulder Jane Doe was 18-year-old woman from Phoenix, Arizona named Dorothy Gay Howard. Harvey was in Colorado at the time, and he was driving a 1951 Dodge Coronet. The body had damage to it that was consistent with being hit by a car. Apparently, she had wounds on her body like she had been hit by a car.
Yeah, you've mentioned this case before during your DNA episode.
Did I?
Yes, you did. I remember the sister. I remember you discussing the sister.
Okay. Well, Harvey was brought to San Quentin State Prison on November 5th, 1958. December 16th, 1958, he was sentenced to death for the murders of Shirley Bridgeford and Ruth Mercado. Okay. It was only a 3-day trial for both of them. He asked for the death sentence.
He asked for it.
And he said, quote, "It's better this way. I knew this was the way it would be," end quote. So from December 1958 to September of 1959, Harvey was confined on death row at San Quentin in California. September 18th, 1959, Harvey, now age 31, was executed at the San Quentin gas chamber by breathing in lethal fumes of cyanide.
Crazy, he's only 31 years old. All this happens, and he's so young.
I know, yeah. After the execution, his ashes were actually unclaimed by his mother. They were interred then at the Napa State Mental Hospital facility until October 29, 1968, when all cremated remains were transferred to the Napa Valley Memorial Park. His name appears on a very large list of individuals who were buried in a large plot named Napa State Hospital Plot. It's basically a mass grave with no individual markers. He was just thrown in with the rest of them. If you haven't heard of this story, it's been around the media, like, a lot. And there's a lot of things that are based on Harvey Glattman's story and his murders. The first one is part of a fictionalized TV movie, Dragnet, often referred to as Dragnet 1966, to distinguish it from the 1954 theatrical release of the same name.
Oh, okay.
So this guy, Jack Webb, he convinced TV executives to relaunch Dragnet as a TV series in 1967 for a 4-year run. Dragnet 1966, however, was not aired until 1969. And in this notable dialogue based on Glattman's own statements by police include the criminal saying, "The reason I killed those girls because they asked me to. They did, all of them." And then the officer saying, "They asked you to?" And the criminal saying, "Sure. They said they'd rather be dead than would be with me." Now, Captain Pierce Brooks, LAPD, helped trick Glatman into revealing where his toolbox was, served actually as a technical advisor on this film. I thought that was pretty interesting. And the story's been covered in podcast galore. One of my favorite ones I actually listened to was from Morbid. But on April 9th, 2021, Serial Killing, a Podcast, aired an episode on Harvey Glatman. October 25th, 2021, the Serial Killer Podcast covered the story as well. It's apparently a separate one. Serial Killing, a Podcast, and then the Serial Killer Podcast. April 25th, 2022, Serial Killers Podcast aired an episode on Harvey Glatman called The Glamour Girl Slayer. December 8th, 2022, the Criminal Makeup Podcast talked about this case on episode 31. February 27th, 2023, and March 1st, 2023, the 2-episode series that Morbid did called The Glamour Girl Slayer. January 14th, 2024, and That's Why We Drink, covered it in episode 362. I love that name. And That's Why We Drink. One of them was a guest recently on Gossip at the Corpse Cart on Wine and Crime.
Really?
Host from And This Is Why We Drink, yeah. March 28th, 2024, Claw and Order podcast aired an episode called Horrible Harvey Glatman. And then October 10th, 2024, the Suspended Sentence podcast also covered this story. In January 2025, CrimeChat with Nat and Kat.
Exactly.
And that is the horrible story of the Glamour Girl Slayer, Lonely Hearts Killer, Harvey Glatman, Frank Johnson, John Glenn, George Williams, rotting in hell.
Yeah. That is a
You're welcome.
Terrible case, Kat.
I know it is. And it's a long case. It was a long one. I didn't want to break it up.
You know what? You probably could have did like multiple parts, but with that said, like the only reason why it's so flippin' long is because the system kept on putting him out there.
Yeah. And all of the background, I think, was critical to of the actual murders that he did because there were so many other victims, and there might have even been a fourth one that could have been his victim, the Jane Doe Boulder, the one that was identified in 2009. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's probably more out there too. He doesn't seem like the bragging type.
He's a coward.
He's a cowardly type.
Yeah.
He confessed anytime he was arrested. He confessed to what he did. Yeah. He was a shitty criminal. He was a shitty person, and I hope he's rotting in hell.
Had something to do with it, Ophelia? Do you think he definitely had mommy issues? But why?
I think he had mommy issues.
Why did he have mommy issues? What happened in his childhood? And what I noticed is that at 11 years old, he was very self-aware of how to satisfy himself. Where did he get that knowledge?
Well, at 4, he tied the string around his penis. At 4 years old.
But what was he watching? Was something going on in that house? Maybe he walked in on his mother and his father. Or maybe they had a different type of romantic relationship that was not... You know, what happened that he was so self-aware of his private parts? Which is not normal.
At that age.
Yeah, kids, like, develop and they discover, and, you know, there's, like, a progression. But, like, not only to be aware at 4, but to be so, like, what do you call that when you're trying to hurt yourself? Like inflicting, like, self-inflicting? Yeah, like pain. Yeah. Where did that all culminate at 4 years old? Like, I just want to, like, that's what I'm thinking. Like, there's no way a 4-year-old is going to know.
Yeah, I don't know. But
that penis is going to deliver certain feelings.
Right.
How? How does he know that?
Well, so I would say boys more so than girls at kind of that, around that age, 3, 4, like they start to realize.
They call it stimming.
Yeah.
Like when kids do that, that's natural. That's the progression. Like there's the sensations happening and they're, you know, that's developing. Yeah. But they still don't understand. Yeah. There was something else to it. No, I agree. Like there was something else that would have. There's definitely something. Yeah. Maybe mom was a dominatrix. I don't know. Maybe mom had a little whip and a chain and a rope that she tied up dad with. You don't know. Like, I don't know. I mean, she didn't even claim his remains either. I don't know. She's over it. She's past it. Yeah. You fooled us too many times. Like, maybe, and part of that, too, is wanting him to be on the right path. And, I set him up, you know, to go on the right path. And she was just fooled the whole time, too. Like, she had no idea. Yeah. So. Sick. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God, Kat. I'm giggling because it's uncomfortable. Oh, my Lord. All right. Well, thank you for that case, You're welcome. I know. I feel dirty. I need a shower. I need a shower, and that snap, I don't think I'll ever forget. Yeah. I wasn't expecting you to say that because I wasn't reading it with you. Mm-hmm. So when you said, and her body snapped, I'm like, what? I mean, and I
wasn't able to get too much information on Ruth Mercado, the third victim, other than basically the circumstances were the same thing with Shirley.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
All right, well, because we don't leave you hanging, chatters.
Hanging by a rope.
By a rope. For more information on this case, please check out After That Crime Chat, only available on Patreon.
Yes, and there are some pictures, some of his actual pictures that he took of these women that are out there. I haven't decided yet how much I'm going to put on there because basically if you want to find them, you can go find them.
Oh my God.
They're horrible. They're horrible. Yeah.
Well, remember Crime Chat with Nat and Kat, when you become a VIP chatter to our Patreon, you'll have access to bonus episodes behind the scenes. You'll see all these disturbing things that we're talking about because that shouldn't be for public consumption, but for you chatters, you know. And also free merch, so check out some merch in the works.
And don't forget to follow us on our socials, Crime Chat with Nat and Kat on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. See what we got going on. And be sure to check out our next episode. Natalie's already kind of teased it a little bit of the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want to miss it.
And we'll see you next time, chatters. Bye.